Hey everybody, I'm finally back. This is Klint here with a new episode of the World's Okayest Mountain Bike Podcast. It's been a long time since I was able to record, and I'm actually coming to you solo this podcast. Ryan and Kyle, when I told them the topic I wanted to talk about, they were more than happy to sit this one out because today is all about saddles and your undercarriage and your behind and trying to find the right saddle for you. And I have learned an immense amount about saddles since past November, buying, trying, sending back. I, I I've lost count of how many saddles I have tried, especially over the last 2 years, but really the last 3 months has been quite the adventure of understanding what saddle shapes and widths and everything is all about. And I have really learned that the industry does not do a very good job at all in explaining these things to people, um, and really helping people understand how their own anatomy works with a saddle beyond just whatever the stated width of the saddle is, and whether or not it's supposed to be designed for quote comfort or performance. There's so much more to it than that, and so that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Now, the reason I've been on this adventure is um, I thought I had figured out what my saddle that worked for me was. I thought for a while that it was the WTB Rocket family, and that, you know, basically I had finally found my saddles. But back last year at the BT Epic in October, the Rocket was working for me until about 3.5, maybe 4 hours in. I started getting numb in my private parts. Started going numb, and then what really has opened my eyes to figuring out if a saddle really works for you or not is if you use an indoor trainer, that will reveal problems so fast because you're in a very static position. You're really not standing, you're not up, down, using a dropper post, being really dynamic on it. You are sitting in a spot. And I found that I was getting numb a lot. And so that really started a whole adventure of me trying tons of different saddles. I'm going to try to just name the list of every saddle that I know I have tried in the past, we'll say 3 or 4 months. WTB Pure, three different WTB rockets. That would be the expensive titanium cross country one, the chromoly one with the gel inserts, the really cheap one. I have tried the giant Romero SL. I have tried the Ergon SMC men's medium large. I have tried Sella Italia Expo Superflow, Sella Italia, what is it, Flight Boost uh, Superflow in the bigger size, Sella Italia Max Boost Flight Superflow. Um, I have tried um, Ergon, the new Ergon SMS Men's Sport. Um, that's a lot of saddles to be trying. And I've settled on the Ergon SMS Men's Sport as so far being the best one for me. But what I really want to get into is the issues that affect saddles and how what I've learned the hard way is just because two saddles are the same width or are described as flat or have cutouts does not even remotely mean that they are the same. All right, so basics of saddle shape. I'm going to do basics of saddle shapes and dimensions that really matter and how that relates to the human body. So, if you were to go on any saddle website, right, and for me, the biggest issue has been numbness sitting on my, it was like pudendal nerve, I think is what it's called, basically sitting on your undercarriage between your front and your back. Too much pressure there can cause things to go numb. And that's been the biggest issue. Um, I have kind of found that basically almost any saddle can be comfortable, even if when you initially sit on it, it doesn't feel that comfortable or if it feels too firm. Um, oh, there's two other saddles I forgot to mention that I tried on top of these. Uh, all but two saddles that I've tried, I have felt like my sit bones could get along with and I could get used to as long as the angle is correct. There were, however, two saddles that I just immediately was like, "There's no way." We'll get into that. Anyway, what I have found is saddle producers, basically you have your dimensions of the saddle, which usually there's just a width, which is the saddle's width being measured at the widest points of what you might call the wings. So if you were looking at the saddle from the top down, um, from side to side, whatever looks like the widest point across from side to side, that's the width measurement that's on every website. And then there's the front to back length measurement. And to be honest with you, I don't really find the front to back measurement to be all that important, in my personal opinion. Shorter, longer saddle doesn't really seem to matter to me that much. Short seems fine with me. The SMS I've got a shorter version of some others. I kind of just don't think that it's that important. Um, but I could be persuaded by people who know more than I do. Uh, and then the other issue is, are there cutouts and stuff. However, what I have found to be what I think is it's equally as important as the width of the saddle is the there's two other main things. There's the shape of the saddle. If you were looking at the saddle from the side and looking at it from nose to tail, is it relatively flat profile or does it kind of have a scoop? Does it dip in the middle? Is it waved? Does it have a rise at the end? That's one direction. But the other that is really not talked about nearly enough, that I think is even more important than just about anything, is how flat is the saddle from side to side, or is it domed? I'm going to use the word domed. So, if you were to take a saddle, look at it from behind, like hold it up, looking at the back, and look at where the widest point of the wings are versus the middle of the saddle. Is there a big curve, like a dome shape or an arch, where if you were actually to are the very edges of the wings, an inch and a half, 2 inches lower than the peak of the saddle? And that has been the issue I have found has been a major problem for me figuring out what works for me. So, uh, basically, what I've found about myself, and the Sella Italia website did help me figure this out of why I was probably getting numb with so many saddles, is all the WTB saddles I have previously had, a lot of saddles I've had, have a good amount of curvature front to back. And the website said, these are usually more comfortable for mountain bike. You're sitting more upright. It kind of holds you in place. Thicker padding. It's going to be comfortable to sit for a long time. And the Rocket, I thought, was pretty comfortable, but I think it just was a little too soft, and I would sink into it as my posture would collapse over hours with fatigue. Uh, However, what I've learned about myself is I have a lot of anterior pelvic tilt, which means naturally I'm comfortable. Basically, if you kind of imagine your pelvis like rotating backwards where your butt kind of sticks out more, that would be anterior pelvic tilt, I'm pretty sure. Um, well, if you do that, that rotates the front of you forward and down. And the first thing I learned is I probably need more of a flat saddle if you think about nose to tip, and also a saddle with a big cutout where the middle there's kind of a big open channel, which makes sense because if you're getting numb from pressure, um, if 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 your sit bones are on the seat and then the middle of you is just sitting over a open gap or a hole, there shouldn't be any pressure there. All right, so I learned this from the Sella Italia website. So I start looking at their saddles, and I really didn't want to spend a ton of money. And their saddles are classified as flat, neutral, um, those sort of things. So the first saddle I got was what the Sella Italia website recommended to me, which was the XLR Aircross. It's off-road. It's supposed to be for cross-country riding. I got the XLR Aircross TM Superflow in the L3, which they have S for small, L for large. Now, my sit bone width is 121 millimeters, which is basically what I've discovered to be the worst width ever, because almost every brand divides their saddles, if they have two sizes, right at 120. So I'm either going to be on the I'm too big for the small medium, or I'm too small for the medium large. It's is at least according to their sizing. Uh, However, this XLR Aircross has a massive cutout. It's supposed to be flat for dynamic riders or riders with a lot of anterior pelvic tilt. So I get this thing. It's $109. I don't get the really, really expensive. And when I'm telling you, it is the most uncomfortable saddle I have ever sat on. I did one trainer ride on it, thinking maybe I'll get used to it. Um, no chance. I mean, it was just awful. Uh, the cutout didn't even matter because it's so dome shaped, um, that even though it was wide, which I found, my sit bones like something a bit wider. And I'll also say, like, I weigh too much. I need to lose weight. If I weighed less, more saddles would probably work for me. But even with the cutout, it's so domed that my sit bones are sitting quite a bit lower than the highest point of the saddle. The we you know it The thing's supposed to be 145 millimeters wide, but if you at 145 millimeters, that point is way lower than the top of the saddle, and it was just awful. Like, what is the point of making a saddle this wide where the actual flat part of the top of the saddle before it starts curving down is probably only, I don't know, 100 millimeters wide, and then it starts curving down a ton. Now, I'm sure there's reasons for that, and for maybe a really lightweight person with a really over the front aggressive riding position, that might work, but I just couldn't do it. So, uh, got the Expo Superflow, which for a Sella Italia has a very flat profile from side to side, meaning you're more sitting up on top of the saddle instead of like sitting over it. Now they call it neutral. It does have a bit more of a dip, but a nice big cutout, and it was pretty comfortable. As long as I had the angle just right, I it was very comfortable for my sit bones. As long as I kept good posture exactly where I needed to be, I wouldn't get numb. But it's kind of heavy, kind of thick. I was still sinking into it and starting to get numb. But I kept that saddle. I sent the XLR back, kept the Expo Superflow. It's currently on my enduro bike, and I'm planning on keeping it because on my enduro bike I'm very upright. Um, I'm not, I'm not climbing hunched over forward, real aggressive like a cross country bike. Uh, it's 155 millimeters wide, I think, in the L3, so quite wide, but that was comfortable for me. Got me thinking that, wide is good, but it still wasn't perfect. So, next saddle I tried, I went on Ergon's website, um, because Ergon has what I think, as well as WTB, they have a very flat profile from side to side, where whatever width they say is actually a usable width. If it's, the Rocket was 142 or 148, I don't know, 142, I think. And that's pretty well a usable width. It's pretty flat across there where you can actually use that. And ergons tend to be a little more flat. They have a generous, nice, deep cutout for pressure relief. Tried the SMC men's and medium large because that was what kind of the saddle they have labeled as being, for more comfortable. And I got it, and it's a great saddle. I still have it. I'm trying to sell it for nothing, $40 for this thing. But it was just too wide in the medium large, which is what I got because it said if you're over 120 millimeters sit bones, get the medium large. That thing's like 165 millimeters wide. If my sit bones were 5 millimeters wider, I probably would be using it on something. But it was just a little too wide, and I never could get in the right position to be in the right place for the cutout. But still a great saddle. Get it level other than the back kind of rises up, which I think is something that's overrated on saddles. Unless you have a really slick material, sliding off the back, I don't think has ever really been a problem. Certainly not for me. I don't feel the need for a big rise in the back, which is kind of like the giant Romero SLs. Those saddles probably would have worked for me if the cutout was deeper, but they're kind of like that, pretty flat, but with a rise in the back, 142 millimeters, just maybe a hair narrow, but also still flat from side to side. So, honestly, those saddles are great. They're very light, but the cutout just not quite deep enough, saddle not quite flat enough from nose to tail. So then I go back to Sella Italia, and I'm like, okay, maybe they make some other saddles that would work for me. And I actually start looking at the gravel and road saddles. Um, and I'm looking at the sizing, and I go to the Flight family, um, which the pictures online, I'm looking like, well, that's not nearly as curved across the top as that XLR was. So I get a Flight Boost Pro um, L3. It's like 148, I don't know. Flight Boost, here it is. Flight Boost TM Superflow. Expensive saddle, 145 millimeters wide. Should be wide enough for me. Get it. It's better than the XLR, but it's still too curved. I mean, I immediately get on it and I know this isn't going to work. Send it back. So then I start looking, I think, this saddle would probably be good if it was just a bit wider. So then I try the Max Flight Boost Superflow. It was 155. And I wanted to like that saddle so bad, but I started getting numb on it. And I don't know if I was sinking into the padding, but it's just so domed across the top that cutout. If you imagine the inside edges of the saddle where the cutout is, so there's like a hole. If you imagine the edges around the hole, because of the dome curvature of the saddle, my inner, like that's basically my groin is still pushing on those edges because I'm sinking down over the top of it instead of sitting up on top. So I finally gave up, sent it back, and just gave up and went back and got this Ergon new SMS Men's Sport, 149 millimeters wide, good generous cutout, and definitely flatter profile across the top and very flat front to back as well. Um, so put that on, and is it perfect? I would say it's still not perfect. And part of that's on me. I've got to get a stronger core. I need to lose some weight because that helps you stay in the nice, powerful posture that you've got your saddle angled for. But so far, it's definitely been the best. I'm going to keep it. I think on an actual mountain bike where you're more moving around and stuff and getting breaks and standing and all these things, that I would think it was perfect and I would not get numb at any point. So, that's kind of where I'm at now. Tried so many things, but I have learned that just because a saddle's labeled for comfort doesn't mean it's actually going to be comfortable for you. A great test is to go put your heels against the wall, your head against the wall, try to stand straight against the wall. And if you have a lot of curvature to your back and you can fit, there's a lot of space between your lower back and the wall, you probably need a more flat saddle. If you're not particularly light, you probably need a saddle that's firmer and is pretty flat if you're looking at side to side. 155 millimeter width saddle to me felt more narrow than 142 millimeter width saddle, because that 155 is measured so much lower than the top of the saddle, whereas a saddle that's flatter across has more usable width. And, I guess maybe if I was a roadie in a super aggressive position and I weighed 40 pounds less than I do now, those others would probably be great. But as it is, um, it just it doesn't work for everybody, and it's really tough. Saddles are so personal, and I think a lot of people are riding around more uncomfortable than they need to be. But the industry just doesn't do a very good job talking about all these things, and almost every single video about saddles on the internet is from the perspective of a roadie bike fitter. And I spent a lot of money going back and forth so you wouldn't have to, realizing that it just doesn't necessarily work for a mountain biker unless you are a hardcore aggressive cross-country rider that is basically in a road bike position. It's probably not going to work. And so I'm going to go ahead and stop the podcast. I know I didn't cover every possible nuance and detail. However, if you have questions, send them in. You can email us at okayestmtb@gmail.com or shoot us a Facebook message. I know it's been a long time since we published anything. However, we are planning to do a podcast hopefully next week that's going to be really cool about a 3-day race down in Arkansas that's happening this May, that is a new one they have never done before. So we're hoping to have the course director on. We're trying to schedule a time, get everybody back together, all three of us, to do that podcast and try to get a regular thing going here again. At the moment, you probably won't see me on the trails for a while. I'm currently actually lying on my belly on kind of a leather beanbag type ottoman because I have a bulging or herniated disc causing some legit bad sciatica in my leg that I've got to let heal or I'm going to be in way worse shape. And so I just thought today's the day. I'm going to throw the headset on, record this podcast, and at least get some content out. So if you've got saddle problems, you are not alone, and you don't have to accept them. And the other thing is, you can contact me because what I've learned, I really think I could help people at least get close to the right saddle instead of just doing trial and error and, ooh, that looks comfortable or that looks uncomfortable. Well, really, you might be surprised at what actually turns out to be comfortable, especially, the saddle I'm liking right now was certainly not the most comfortable in the initial 5 minutes, but it's definitely been the most comfortable so far after 30, 40, an hour, because it seems to work with how I'm built, how my body position is, all those things. So thanks for listening. I know for some of you this would probably be terribly boring and you shut it off or wanted to shut it off, but you made it 24 minutes and I appreciate it greatly. And again, we're going to try to do more podcasts regularly, even if I have to do them by myself. All right. Have a good one, everybody, and thanks for listening.